documents in detail describes each of the points of the peace formula. Next, you mentioned the victory plan of President Zelensky. Yes, it's a very important, very concrete document. What is necessary to do, first of all, for our partners and allies, to make the position of Ukraine strong for any potential future negotiations. It's a very important. Ukraine is a victim of aggressions. We are fighting practically 3 years against the country who is more than us, who have the more people, more weapons, and this is nuclear states. Ukraine refused from the nuclear weapons, as you remember, from the very beginning of our independence, received the not working Budapest memorandum guarantees, in which still we have the signature of the United States, of the Russia, of the China, of the France, and many other countries. I think all these documents it's basic documents in which now in the consultation with the new administration of the elected President Trump and other alliance, we can go forward for the concrete steps to prepare to make position of Ukraine strong, and of course to go to the end of this war by the just peace. No more than Ukrainians want to end this war.
Mr. Stoltenberg, with your tenure at NATO from 2014 to 2024, that's the year of Russia's first invasion in 2014 and then the full-scale invasion years later. Do you see we are getting closer to 2025, being able to put an end to it when it comes to the invasion that started not in 2022?
Unpredictable, so I'm very careful to predict exactly what will happen in 2025. Having said that, it's absolutely within reach to end this war this year, not least because Russia is paying a very high price. Yes, the situation is difficult on the battlefield. Yes, Russia is pushing and gaining some territory, but Russia is also paying a very high price. You know, this war started, they thought they were able to take Kyiv within days and Ukraine within weeks. That failed. The Ukrainians have been able to liberate 50% of the territory that Russia controlled in the beginning. They are losing more than 1,000 men per day. The casualty rate is like 1,000. And they have been able to put their economy on a war footing, but the reality is that they're paying a very high price. Inflation now in Russia is officially around 10%. In reality, most likely much higher. The interest rate in the national bank is 21%. And they have an urgent lack of workforce because hundreds of thousands, millions have perhaps left the country. Many are at the front, many casualties, and then many are now working in the defense industry, so the rest of the economy is really suffering. So this is not the time to reduce the pressure on Russia. It's actually the time to step up, to convince them that they have to sit down and negotiate a just peace. And let me just say that Andriy Yermak and the political leadership in Ukraine, we should all thank them. Because they have demonstrated leadership, they have demonstrated and showed the world what courage is, and they have now for close to 3 years fought the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and actually since 2014, as you said, been fighting against aggression from Russia. So my main message, also coming back from Washington this morning, actually, I've been there for over the weekend. I met many people, both in the outgoing and the new administration, and it's absolutely within reach to convince the United States to continue the military support to Ukraine. With Europeans stepping up, that will give Ukraine the military support they need.
To what extent, Mr. Yermak, do you want to see the Europeans stepping up now with the Americans, ideally, as we're waiting to hear more from the new administration? Because Mr. Stoltenberg mentioned the price that is very high for Russia to pay. But this price for Russia to pay has been getting only higher ever since the full-scale invasion, and that has not stopped Russia.
First of all, necessary to be honest. Why, after the full-scale invasion, we, with my fault, decided to create the group for the sanctions. Because we saw in the beginning the sanctions which was issued look very good, but practically not work. Unfortunately, and this is the truth, we are from the first day, the big group of experts, international group, analyze each sanctions, give recommendations, criticize some sanctions. It took a long period of time. For example, just in the end of the terms of the previous already administration in White House, we saw the real strong energy sanctions. All the sanctions worked. It's not true, and the Russia tried to look that everything okay. It's not okay. The Russian economy, it's in the bad situations, and it will be increased. It's necessary to continue to work for these sanctions. But of course, if you ask about the Europeans, the President Zelensky was very clear and very honest in his address yesterday. We need to keep the unity of the Europe. We absolutely need close cooperations and close unity between European countries and United States. Without one of these elements, this support will be weak. It means that our job today, and thank you, Jens, I know that he's deeply understands how it's going, how it started, and his meeting in DC and other alliance, other leaders, it's very important. We can't lose just 1 minute, 1 hour, because this terrible war is continue. We need very quickly make everything, the new administration will be in the same level of understanding what in the land, what in the front line, what our strategy, and why we continue this consultation. And I hope that the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump will take place as soon as possible. It's extremely important, because how said President Zelensky yesterday, I very much appreciated that President Trump expressed his energy and his readiness to end this war by just peace. I'm his partner in this. I'm ready to work together.
But there's, we've heard from Donald Trump during the campaign, so yes, it has to be looked at as some of the campaign narrative and campaign promises regarding that he would be able to finish the war in 24 hours, to put an end to it. Then that's the exchange we've heard about at the first 100 days, then we've heard about possibility of rather going into 6 months. The views that I've heard are about anything regarding 24 hours would be the worst case for Ukraine. So taking 100 days or 6 months is a better option for Ukraine. What do you think? How can the American administration step in there?
Well, first of all, I think that we need to realize that everyone wants this war to end. The challenge is that the quickest way of ending a war is to lose a war. But that will not bring peace. That will bring occupation of Ukraine. So the challenge is to end the war in a way that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe. That's the challenge. And I don't think we can change Putin's mind. I believe that Putin has as an ambition to control Ukraine, to put in a puppet government in Kiev. But I think we can change his calculus, that if the price he has to pay to achieve that goal is too high, measured in the number of forces lost on the battlefield every day, measured in the number of armored vehicles, military equipment lost on the battlefield, but also measured when it comes to the economic cost, inflation, overheating the economy, high interest rates, then he may change his calculus and actually be willing and be forced to sit down and negotiate, agree, a just peace for Ukraine. And the only way to get there, to change his calculus, is to provide weapons to Ukraine. So the reality is that the more we want peace, and the sooner we want peace, the more weapons we have to deliver to Ukraine, and the more commitment for the long term. Because now Putin believes that he can just wait us out. If we have strong, credible commitments for long-term military support to Ukraine, the war will end sooner. And then on the United States, I cannot speak on behalf of a new US administration. I've spent some days there, but of course I'm not speaking on behalf of them. We have to listen to what they say and what they do. Second, there are some questions asked because of some statements that has been given. But yes, on Monday, on the day of the inauguration, President Trump stated that it has to be peace to strength. And he wants a deal. And if you want a deal, you need leverage. And the leverage we have on Russia is military support to Ukraine. So if you take the idea of peace to strength, if you take the idea of a negotiated deal, then the only negotiating power is the brave soldiers of Ukraine and the weapons we are providing them with. So if the US continues to provide support, if Europe steps up, and we have a credible framework to do this for the long term, then I actually think that we can change the calculus and force Russia to accept a peace which is just and lasting.
Do you think we can force Russia to accept that rather than forcing Ukraine to accept something less favorable for Ukraine?
Can you repeat, please? To more understand.
Yeah, of course. Mr. Stoltenberg just said it's about forcing Russia into accepting, building the leverage over Russia. I'm trying to figure out, when it comes to this leverage to be built, 3 years into it, how much more leverage can be built over that? But I'm trying to figure out about how to make sure that it's Russia that is forced to accept certain deals and not Ukraine that is forced by partners to accept deals that are not so favorable.
Look, in this sense, the President Zelenskyy very clear. He never go for any compromise for the independent territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And why we are talking always that Ukraine need to be strong in any position? Because honestly, we are fighting practically 3 years against country which is more times bigger, more people. This country not democracy. Please don't forget about it, because for them, life of the person costs nothing. They absolutely, it's reality. They lost thousands, and thousands in the territory of Ukraine, thousands in the Kursk region where we are still. It means that this is a lot of things against which we are fighting. And this is, we need to be in some potential conversations. First of all, in the equal position. When these languages which not work with us, of ultimatum which we are listening, if you just please look what news appeared from Kremlin, from these mad people. Ukraine and Moldova will not exist up to the end of of this year. Russia ready to go off, but just with some ultimatum. It's demonstrated that they wanted to end this war. It means that it's necessary to create the situation, then they have no chance not to go to the end of the war. And this is what it's necessary to do now. It's necessary to not lose this unity of the world. I'm especially mentioned that we made the great job during the last years. 100 countries, it's now united and supported the just peace, the logical plan which based of the international law and the chapter of United Nations. And this is necessary not to lose and to make really realistic, successful plan of the steps, then Russia have no chances to not accept it. Ukraine, in the end, I'd like to add that, look, Ukraine not ask anything more than described by international law and the treaties which all the country respect, just for 1%. And we can explain the arguments, everything which explained in the peace formula, in the victory plan, it's 100% based on the international law. And please tell me, in what base they wishes and requests? Only met wishes of dictator Putin.
I want to ask you regarding Mr. Stoltenberg, regarding Ukraine's NATO aspirations, because this is something that you were at NATO when Ukraine obviously applied, but Ukraine's possible future within NATO was cited by Vladimir Putin as the reason that for starting the full-scale invasion. But I want to put that aside because Ukraine cannot enter NATO now during the war, but this is what Ukraine needs. And I'm trying to figure out what kind of security guarantees can we produce when it comes to somehow replacing or substituting the security guarantees which did not work during the Budapest Memorandum, but also with the impossibility of having the NATO security guarantees. Because it's not about Putin saying about Ukraine being in NATO and then he started the war. That's a different reasoning on that.
Well, I strongly believe that a lasting peace in Ukraine depends on solid security guarantees. Because the first step towards peace is some kind of ceasefire. At least that's very often the first step. And then a line is agreed. The challenge is that we have seen agreed lines in Ukraine before. After the annexation of Crimea and Russia went into Eastern Donbass in 2014, we got the Minsk I. And that was the ceasefire line. The problem was that Russia violated that just after a few months. We had the big battles also around the Baltcheve, and they pushed the line further east, and then we negotiated, or not we, but also the countries involved, negotiated Minsk II in 2015. And then that lasted for 7 years. And after 7 years, we had a full-fledged invasion, so violating Minsk II. So if we now agree a new line, we cannot have Minsk III. It has to be something which is credible. And even if that line is not the international recognized border, of course we don't have to recognize the occupied territory as Russian. But it has happened before that you have ceasefire lines where you just temporarily accept that the other side controls something because it has been a war and because there's a ceasefire line. So the requirements number one is the line. But the requirement number two, which I think is actually even as important, or perhaps even more important, is to guarantee that it stops there. And then, of course, we need, I say sometimes we need something better than Budapest, but perhaps it will not be Bucharest, meaning that in Bucharest, NATO promised NATO membership. In Budapest, we had the Budapest Memorandum that was only some paper and didn't prove credible at all. I believe that the strongest and the best security guarantee is Article 5, meaning NATO membership. It has worked. It can work again. And of course, it's for NATO to decide how far Article 5 apply. We had West Germany as a NATO ally without East Germany. We had France as a member of NATO without Algiers, and Algiers was then a province in France. Something similar is that the United States has security guarantees to Japan without the Kurils, which is the island chain north of Japan, which is occupied by Russia. So if we want, it's about political will, we can extend Article 5 as far as we want, without invoking Article 5 because Crimea is occupied by Russia. So I have been pushing for this because some years ago I thought it was possible to find something for Ukraine in between membership or not membership, but that space in between.
Just like candidate status for.
So this candidate status, this idea that
transition.
Yeah, transition. It was easier before, but this space in between Russia and NATO is a much more dangerous space now than before. So therefore, I have actually. I started in Bucharest as a Prime Minister of Norway. I was skeptical. I was on the German camp in a way. But now I realize that the space for this in-between is so narrow, so dangerous. So I strongly believe that one way of ending this war in a credible way, which is not Minsk III, is actually to give strong and credible security guarantees, and then the cleanest and the best way is NATO membership. Of course, I realize that it is not enthusiasm for this in all capitals. So then maybe we also have to consider second-best solutions. And those second-best solutions are, first of all, and that will apply anyway, is to arm the Ukrainians to the teeth. Because if there was anything we did wrong in 2014, was that we didn't arm Ukraine from 2014 until 2022. And let me add, until, I think it was 2017 or 2018, this was a big discussion inside NATO. Most allies said no lethal aid to Ukraine because it could provoke Russia. It was President Trump that made the decision to start to deliver lethal aid weapons to Ukraine. And
javelins.
Javelins. And we remember, I said it was a big discussion. It was controversial. So again, if you're concerned, I can again not promise anything, but last time I worked with President Trump on these issues, actually he helped us.
And especially javelins, it was the weapons which help to liberate the Kievsky region. Because don't forget that we are started to receive the serious ammunition. It's in some month after the starting of the full-scale invasion. And one thing I'd like to add. During we are discussing the question of NATO, please don't forget, North Korean soldiers already very near of the border of the NATO. It's a very important signal. And this is about the security, not just for Ukraine, it's the security of the all Europe and in the end of the all of the world.
I have to open the floor. Yeah, let's go. We're going to take a few questions if we have. We do have 4 minutes and a half. I'm going to be very strict here. Please, let's go. Can we have the microphone here in the first row, please? Just keep it brief, please, okay?
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Ishan Tharoor of the Washington Post. Mr. Yermak, given realistically what Ukraine can expect from concessions from Russia or the reclamation of territory, what is the difference between a just peace and a frozen conflict?
Just peace, it's the peace which have the security guarantees. The frozen, it's you have for some period of time, and we have very bad experience of the frozen conflict. And I'm absolutely sure, and thank you, Jens, that you have mentioned this, the President Zelensky never going for any solutions which will be looks like the Minsk III, Minsk IV, because honestly, I'm the person who personally was participated and represents in Normandy. I'm not sure what was the logic of the people who signed Minsk. And they maybe don't have the goal. I not mean our partners who is really want to help. I mean two parts. What they think, because in these documents, if you attentively, I know each phrase in this very bad in the legal sense documents. Zero about Crimea, a lot of very controversial things, representative of the territory, appearance of some signatures in that moment, not LNR, DNR, this separatist republic, but already appears these two guys. A lot of questions.
We're going to take one question here, please.
I'm Peter Wolodarski from Dagens Nyheter, Sweden. Mr. Yermak, you mentioned Budapest and the security guarantees that you were given, and nuclear weapons were given away from Ukraine. So first, your reflection, was that a mistake by Ukraine to give away the nuclear weapons? And if you don't get a NATO membership or credible security guarantees, are you ruling out trying to get hold of nuclear weapons once again?
Thank you very much. And I want to ask you that question too, briefly, just, was that a mistake to give up on the
I
nuclear
was
weapons?
very shortly. If we will, if in this moment we have nuclear weapons, this war never happened. Next, please imagine what happened next morning if it's not acceptable for us, but if this end of the world will be not by just peace. Believe me, all the smart people in this world will recognize that only nuclear weapons work as a guarantee. Because, again, it's aggressions of nuclear states against not nuclear states. Plus, you absolutely, yes, it's not work. But I'm sorry, these documents, it's not, nobody not declare officially. I go out from Budapest. It exists. We don't like it, but it exists. Of course, juridical sense, what the people sign, but it exists. What about political images and political responsibility?
Very briefly, I really have few seconds. Do you think it was a mistake for Ukraine to give up on nuclear weapons?
I think we have to prove that it was not a mistake, because Andriy is absolutely right, and that is that if Ukraine loses this war and a nuclear power, Russia, is able to take control over Ukraine, then the lesson is that you need nuclear weapons to defend yourself. And it's wrong to give up nuclear weapons. So that just adds to the importance of us taking the responsibility to provide them with the weapons they need to defend themselves against a nuclear aggression.
Jens Stoltenberg, Andriy Yermak, thank you very much. Wish we had more time, trust me. I have so many questions left on my side too.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the speakers for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.